and let's just dive right into it. So first off, we're going to do a quick membership update. So we're at 272 members, including 9 strategic members, and we continue to show really strong growth on their committer population. So we're up to 1,625 committers as of June 30th, and so we're obviously very pleased to see that growth. Some new solution members there. I'm not going to go through every one of these but you'll see in a moment that most of these are signing up to become parts of our new working groups. And so welcome one and all, and appreciate the support and the engagement in the Eclipse Foundation and our community. Also, 2 new associate members, the University of Luxembourg and the University of Montreal, so welcome both. And then, so let's talk a little bit about working groups and the new members of these various working groups. So we've been very, very busy over the last really 2 months, and we have created 3 new working groups, all in the automotive sector. So obviously we're very excited about this. But so the 3 new working groups, and in the order of creation, was open mobility, which was created back in June, then Open ADX, and Open Genesis, which was just created earlier this week, actually. And then a new member of Karakun joining the pre-existing Open MDM working group. So Open ADX is, as I said, a new working group, and it's focused on building out a tool chain for creating autonomous driving systems. So the goal here is to create an industry standard platform for the tooling infrastructure needed. And when we say tools in this context, it's not just modeling tools and IDEs. It's system verification and test. It's simulation. It's really all of the various pieces and frameworks that you need to build, test, deliver, and manage autonomous driving systems. And Open Genesis is primarily led by Tuv Sud, and is definitely focused on autonomous driving, but the emphasis there is about building an open source framework for doing the evaluation and qualification from a safety perspective of autonomous driving systems. So these are both very exciting initiatives, and we're obviously very pleased to get these off the ground. Just a quick financial update. So when we did the 2019 budget, we forecast $6.4 million in revenue and $6.7 million in expense, with a net income of a loss of $300,000. 2019, so far as recruitment has been going a little bit slow, and largely that's been because the Jakarta EE initiative has been taking longer to ship and come to fruition than we had originally expected. So any and all recruitment related to Jakarta EE is basically slipped out to the right. So as of the moment, our forecast for this year is $6 million in revenue, $6.4 million in expense, with a net loss. When it rounds to 0.4, it's about $350,000, $360,000. So that's the forecast as of this moment. All right, and then now the main thing I wanted to talk about today is an initiative that we're starting, and we've discussed this twice now with the board of directors, but we want to overhaul our fundamental governance document, that being our bylaws. And so our bylaws were updated in 2011, but it was a relatively minor update. I think it's fair to say that fundamentally our bylaws have been pretty much the same since our creation in 2004. And lots has changed here at the Eclipse Foundation, and with our community and communities. And chief among them is that we now have a far broader scope of technology than when we first started. When the Eclipse Foundation was started, everything was about the Eclipse IDE. Of course, the Rich Client platform came out shortly thereafter, but it was all about OSGI, the Eclipse plugin model, and those kinds of technologies. And now we're into geospatial, IoT, Jakarta, microprofile. So there's a far broader range of technologies, and we're not all about Java anymore. There's significant projects that are shipping, millions of lines of C code, Python code, and others. And so we are definitely becoming a big tent of open collaboration, and that's very much by intent. It's something that we've been working on for quite some time, and it's time to have that reflected in our bylaws. So acceptance of broader licensing regime other than EPL only. So obviously we think the EPL is a great license, and particularly the EPL 2.0 is we think is a very strong open source license. But we're seeing more and more projects coming to the Eclipse Foundation and our communities, which are using other licenses, particularly permissive licenses like Apache, MIT, and BSD. So the timeline, so changing your bylaws is not something you do quickly. So we had the initial board conversation in June. July and August, we're going to be communicating to members, and of course, this is a big part of that. We want to provide lots of opportunity for feedback. So in September, we're going to be providing red lines, so concrete proposed revisions to the board for review. The board will vote on it in our October board member. Immediately following that, we'll initiate a vote of the membership at large, and a 2/3 majority of our members do have to vote in support of changing our bylaws. And then the goal is to have this fully in effect for January 1, 2020. Obviously, it takes time to get all of our members to vote, so we're planning on pushing this. The expectation is it's going to be on the order of 5 or 6 weeks of voting, and to get this to a completion. So just to go over a couple of the things that we're looking at. So one is to change our purposes statement. So the purposes statement is the opening couple of paragraphs in our bylaws. It basically says what it is that we do, and we've been living with our original definition of supplying frameworks and exemplary extensible tools, but we'd like to obviously expand that to closer reflect reality. And so open source technologies, specifications, platforms, runtimes, frameworks, and tools, and define that as the Eclipse platform for purposes of the bylaws. Another aspect is right now use of any license other than the EPL requires a unanimous vote of the board of directors every time we do that. The board has delegated that authority to me for approving Apache and BSD as additional licenses, but all other cases still have to go to the board for unanimous approval. So the intent here is unanimous approval of the board would still be required to change our own licenses, but use of other licenses would no longer require this. And this particular aspect of the bylaw change does require a unanimous vote of the board of directors. So some other things that we're looking at is to make it more explicit how affiliate organizations can join and participate in our organization, and what they do with and without providing additional multiple votes. So it's, we actually believe that this is fully provided for under the existing bylaws, but you kind of have to tilt your head sideways and read it 3 times before you get there. So we want to make it more explicit than it currently is. And obviously with industry consolidation continuing to be a thing, this is definitely something that we want to make sure is very clear in our bylaws. Some other things, so there's some cleanup. There is a provision in the bylaws for when supermajority votes of the board are required. So one of the things we want to do is we've mentioned move the dependency license from unanimous to supermajority. The specification process is something that is new and right now is not explicit in the bylaws. We want to basically make it a peer of the Eclipse development process. So just like the development process, have the EFSP approved by a supermajority of the board. And then there's a few other things that have been there that perhaps made sense in 2004. Like there's a thing in there that says if we appoint somebody as a leader of a PMC and they happen to work for a company that has over half of the PMCs, yada yada yada. So that's an anachronism. I think that was I think that was originally put there because, of course, Eclipse was spun out of IBM originally, so there was some trying to make sure that IBM wasn't running all of the PMCs, but that's definitely not a problem anymore. Our PMC leadership is very diverse. Entering into a formal affiliation with another organization. And then there's a provision there that says we need approval of outside counsel. We need board approval, and we think that it would make more sense just to say that approval of general counsel. And then various cleanups. So one of the things that we're proposing is that this quarterly members meeting could be replaced with quarterly reports. The actual attendance at this meeting is reasonably low or quite low. We do get quite a few views after the fact. So simply recording something like this and putting it out on YouTube could be an aspect, but a written report that was included with our membership newsletters could be another way to do this. The content we think that the content that's provided in these meetings is actually really great, but just whether actually having a quarterly meeting I don't think that makes sense anymore. One thing that's been a nonstop source of confusion is that solutions members, it's the bylaws state that solution members and up must release a commercial offering within 1 year of joining the Eclipse Foundation, and that's been a nonstop source of confusion when we're doing our recruitment. So we're just going to remove that. As we already talked about, the relationship of affiliates and their associated fees. And finally, the councils. So we have the Architecture Council and the Planning Council. The Architecture Council is our source of wisdom, mentorship, and process. So we might rename it or do something with that. We want to keep it. It's actually something that's very important to us. The Planning Council is almost entirely focused on the Eclipse IDE simultaneous release. So we actually don't think that necessarily belongs in the bylaws anymore, because it's working on about a quarter of our projects as opposed to being something that spans all of our projects. And we've tried to change the sort of mission of the Planning Council, and so far that hasn't stuck. So at this point, it's not that we're planning on getting rid of the Planning Council. It does a very useful function, but we don't think it needs to be baked into the bylaws any longer. Okay.
That's great. Thank you for this. So we have our annual meeting scheduled for October 23rd at EclipseCon Europe. So if folks are interested in talking about this, then is that something? Will this be a topic again at that meeting?
Well, by then the board will have voted on it. Right. So what our intent is to be sending out some emails to our membership and soliciting additional feedback through those channels, and also. We'll have a couple of phone calls where we can go over the red lines with the membership, any interested members, as well as the board beforehand. That'll probably happen in September. We'll do a couple of those calls because with calendars and so on, it's hard to get everybody. So we'll definitely have some communications channels, and we will talk about this at the members meeting in October. But by that point, the board will have voted on it, and it'll be more about, okay, this is what this is what we are going to be turning over to be a vote of the membership at large, as opposed to an opportunity to provide additional feedback.
Great. So feedback is welcome from members in the interim?
Absolutely. And if there's, for those who have, carefully read all of our bylaws and want to provide additional ideas on things that we could change or fix, happy to listen to additional ideas as well, of course.
Great. Yeah, this is a big deal for us. Making our bylaws reflect what we're doing is key. So, Stephanie, are there questions for Mike